Welcome, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces, see some names on the screen. We will be getting started momentarily. Please do settle in, check your mic, check your camera. If you're going to be engaging in camera today, please do make sure the settings are working. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Community Steering Committee. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. Welcome. As you are all settling in, we're going to go through some logistics before we do an official welcoming. So again, thank you for joining tonight's meeting to ensure accessibility to all CSC members and residents and other members of the public who are joining us tonight. We will go through some logistics to ensure that everyone has accessibility to tonight's meeting. So as part of our meeting tonight, let me just make sure that you all can see my screen here. We are offering simultaneous translation from English to Spanish. And so what you should see now on your screen is a little globe icon that indicates which language you can select for tonight's meeting. If you are a monolingual English speaker, please select the word like globe that has the word English so that you can listen to tonight's meeting in English. And if you would like to listen to tonight's meeting streamed in Spanish, please do select the Spanish. At this time, I'm going to pass it to my colleagues at Lingüística, Tania, to provide us with the same instructions in Spanish.
Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos. Este es un recordatorio de que estamos proveyendo interpretación simultánea al español para esta reunión. Si usted desea escuchar la reunión en español esta noche, si usted se unió con una computadora, va a ver el icono de un mundo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Por favor, seleccione el canal de español. Si usted ingresó con un teléfono móvil o una tableta, va a tocar su pantalla, va a buscar 3 puntitos donde diga más o more, va a seleccionar donde dice interpretación de idioma, seleccione el canal de español y si desea escuchar nada más la voz del intérprete y no 2 voces a la vez, puede seleccionar donde dice silenciar el audio original para que escuche nada más al intérprete y por último seleccionar donde dice done, listo o finalizado para que nos pueda escuchar completamente en español. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. I really appreciate you giving those instructions. As a reminder, I want to make everyone aware that the translation is now available. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give folks just a minute to select the correct channel. Okay, not seeing any hands raised or comments in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and continue with tonight's meeting. So hello again and good evening and welcome to our February Shafter Community Steering Committee meeting. My name is Amy Ramos and I'll be facilitating tonight's meeting on behalf of the Harder & Company facilitation team. I'm also joined by tonight's co-host, which is Jessica Olson from the Air District, as well as my colleague Jen Marasigan, who will be taking notes tonight and facilitating on behalf of our team, writing down any kind of action items that we'll have and also providing any technical support. As you already know, Jem and I are available to help with technical support to keep track of tonight's meeting. So as the night progresses, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us, and you can do that by raising your hand or putting a comment in the chat, and we'll be sure to respond as soon as possible. As you get settled in, please do mute yourself if you are not speaking. Please do change your screen name by clicking on the right side of your picture or video if you are sharing your video, and use the following nomenclature. That is for CSC members. We'd love for you to use the naming convention of having your first name followed by your last name. If you are a resident, please put an R followed by your first name and last name. All other participants can place their first name and affiliation, like Jake Smith from the Air District, or any of the other naming conventions that we have here. And if you have any questions about that, please do reach out to Jem or I, and we can definitely help you update your name. If you don't do so, you will see that Jem and I will be going through virtually through the space and updating your name so that we can record today's conversation effectively. So just some reminders of virtual meeting etiquette. We do please ask you to stay on mute when you're not speaking. So unless you are speaking and you plan to speak, you can stay on mute. You could also use *6 if you're participating by phone. We do ask that you raise your Zoom hand to ask a question during a presentation. Also feel free to use the Q&A. So for example, if someone's talking and you don't want to lose track of thought, please feel free to type your question in the chat, and we'll be sure to read them aloud so that everyone is able to engage. And as a friendly reminder to our residents, if you are participating in the stipend program, you should plan to stay on for about 75% of the meeting to be eligible for the stipend program. So that's about 90 minutes of today's meeting. And as a friendly reminder, if you are in the stipend program, please do reach out to our team, that is the Harder & Company team, to ensure that you have all of your paperwork finalized. As we have launched a new year, this is 2023. Therefore, we need to make sure that we have any W-9s or other tax documentation current. All right, so for tonight's meeting, we don't have a community co-host. I want to remind you of the value of having a community co-host. It's really important for us to have adequate community representation, that is having you all co-facilitate the evening with us. And so this is available to anyone that's interested in being part of the facilitation team for any one given night. We promise it's not an intimidating process. We will help you throughout the planning. I know some of you have been co-hosts in the past. So at some point, we'd love to hear if you have any recommendations on how to best engage CSC members in becoming community co-hosts so that we can co-facilitate together. So since we don't have a community co-host, I'm just going to walk you through today's agenda, and then I'll pass it to Jessica to provide some opening remarks. So based on the input that you all have provided over the last month in terms of the last meeting and then the last agenda setting meeting, tonight's agenda is really packed with several updates to help you stay current on everything that's happening in your community. So we're going to start by having a review of the action items. So you'll see the progress that the Air District has made on many of the items that you all have suggested as important and that we should be monitoring. Followed by that, we'll have a community air monitoring update where you'll hear from Robert, and who will provide you with an update of what the results are. In addition to that, we'll have a CERT measure update at 6 o'clock. So there'll be a lot of updates, but don't worry, there'll be time for you to ask questions, provide your input, and provide some constructive criticism to help the implementation of AB617 move forward. And then, of course, as always, if time allows, at 6:30, we'll have some standing updates, and then we'll wrap up with next steps. Hopefully, if we have time by 6:45, we'll make some space so that those of you who have some ideas and recommendations for how to get more engagement from community members to engage as community co-hosts, we can have that discussion around 6:45, followed by a 5-minute public comment. So are there any logistics questions before we get started? All right, not seeing any logistics questions, so I'm going to pass it to Jessica for some opening remarks. Jessica?
Great. Thank you, Amy, and welcome all. My name is Jessica Olson. I am the Director of Community Strategies and Resources with the Air District, and my team oversees implementation of AB617 at the district. I'm going to briefly just walk you through kind of the group of district folks we have. As Dr. Ramos just went over, we have a kind of a variety of topics we're covering today. So just wave your hand, district folks. So we have Zong, who of course you're very familiar with. She's with our outreach team, and Eric Salas, who is with our community strategies team. They're here to help take notes and guide this process and follow up on action items, as you'll hear. We have Maricela Velasquez, who is with our bilingual outreach team, and she's always on to coordinate with our residents. We have Chai Tao and Robert Gillis, who are with our air monitoring and analysis teams, because we have an air monitoring presentation later today. We also have Carrie Todd, who's with our incentives team. We have an incentives update. And then we do have John Stagnero. He is the Director of Compliance, in case there's any questions that come up during action items or anything else about some of the compliance action. So I appreciate you letting us all be here today, bringing a variety of staff, more than we normally do, just to help address any concerns. And I really look forward to the conversation. As Dr. Ramos said, it is definitely, we're going to pause and take feedback a lot. That's what we're here for today. And I'm just very grateful for you all. So welcome, and I look forward to tonight's meeting. Thank you, Dr. Ramos.
Thank you, Jessica. And, I just want to remind you that as we're going through the agenda items, if anyone from the public also has questions, let's try to get those questions in as we're discussing the particular agenda item, so that you don't have to wait until the public comment. However, if you have a general question about something new, something that's not on the agenda for today, please do hold those comments for the general public comment area. So with that said, we're going to kick off tonight's meeting with a review of the action item tracker. As you already know, we use the action item tracker to provide some transparency and accountability. That is, over the last year or so, the Air District has been monitoring all of the action items that this CSC recommends. We track them, and then they follow through on implementation. And tonight we're here to provide you with some updates on how things are going. As a reminder, as Zong in a moment is going to share some of the action items, you might have some questions. You might be recollecting the action item a little bit different. You're like, well, that's not how I thought of it. Feel free to jump in, ask any questions, and we can always make modifications. As we go through the evening's meetings, you probably will have a lot more action items to include in the meeting, and we'll be sure to keep track of those. Are you ready, Zong? I'm going to pass it to Zong.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Okay, just wanted to remind everyone where they can find the action items. This is the main page of the Shafter community page. So the running action items are always posted here. So all you have to do is click on this button, and you will get a new window, and you will see the list of action items. So from the last meeting in January, we have a couple that are still pending, and we are still following up on both of these items. The first one is an update on ammonia emissions during the winter. And then the second action item is to provide information on regarding violation fees. So both of them, as soon as we have more updates, we will share that with the CSC. And then we do have a couple that are in the completed that I also wanted to share from last meeting. The first one, I'm going to jump to the second item actually, and that was just that we noted that the district will continue to share additional details on the approval process for proposals for certain incentive measures to ensure that CSC members have opportunities to engage in subcommittee work. And then the first one that is completed was sending out the event flyer for our fireplace changeout event that we had in January. And it was a successful event. We had about 30 people in attendance. Many of them were from Shafter, some from Bakersfield, and one from Wasco. We had 4 hearth retailers from Bakersfield in attendance, and they shared information about the program, as well as the different options for residents. And we also had, we gave away some raffle prizes as well as gift cards. So it was a fun event. It was well attended, and wanted to also give an opportunity. We had a couple CSC members in attendance and wanted to give this opportunity to them if they wanted to share any comments about what they thought about the event. I see
Great.
Michelle.
I see, yeah, Michelle has raised her hand. Go for it, Michelle.
Hello. I saw, we went, and sorry if I can't see myself on the screen. Sorry about that. It was great. There was about, like she said, 4 or 5 vendors there, and we were able to talk to all of them and figure out what they offered and how they offered it. They had brochures. One person had an example of the actual fireplace, and they would help fill out the form. I didn't do the form that night. I did it later, and super easy, which is great. And it was really informative. And then if you wanted, the person you met with was in a position to come out and make an appointment. And I know 2 or 3 people that they've already done that. And really informative and very easy. It almost still takes probably 1 trip into the showroom to really validate what you want, but it was great. They took all the pictures, did everything, and it was a great event. Thank you so much for putting it on.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Michelle. Angie, and then we'll go to John.
Hi, I just wanted to reiterate what Michelle was saying. It was a nice event to have, but what made it really easy was having the people there to explain everything. I didn't do my application there at the moment, like Michelle. I did it later on in the week, which at the same time they came and did my measurements. So since the timeline starting January 17th was the day of the demo, my fireplace was already installed this last Friday. So that was start to finish. My application's already been sent to Air District for the completion packet for the verification for the reimbursement. So it's a very fast and easy process, very painless. And yeah, I only made 1 trip to the showroom just to really pick out what I wanted as far as what does this really look like. And that was it, pretty simple. Thank you.
Well, that is great to hear. You all sound like an infomercial, like you're paid to give an update. This is too good to be true. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. John, would you like to share?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Dr. Ramos, and thanks everyone for having me tonight. I just saw the action items on that you had shared regarding the enforcement actions in the community and thought I'd provide a quick update on that action item now, if now is a good time. Can I do that? Cool. Okay. So just to kind of cover how penalties are assessed after violations and what happens with them. So they're collected whenever violations are issued, in this case within the community, and penalties from those violations are added to the district's general fund. And that fund is used to implement air quality improvement programs in the community and throughout the district. And what does that mean? Well, that means that they're used to help support all the district's air pollution reduction activities, including performing compliance inspections, responding to community member air pollution related complaints, providing education and compliance assistance to businesses to help them understand what rules and regulations they need to comply with. Those penalties also support public education and advertising and outreach to engage with community members regarding district rules and regulations, and also supports incentive opportunities to help improve local air quality and support air quality monitoring activities as well. So the Burn Cleaner fireplace exchange that we just heard about, that's in part supported through district penalties that are collected through violations issued throughout the district and within the community. And then as for the status, there's another part of the action item wanting to know the status of violations within the community and the fees and associated with each of them. And so we do have the annual enforcement report for Shafter, and that annual enforcement report includes the 12-month period from July through June every year. And annual reports for 2020 and 2021 and 2022 are all posted on the community webpage. And I'll drop a link to that page in the chat. And that report includes inspections, a list of all inspections that are conducted over that time period in the community, a list of all complaints received within the community during that time period, and all violations issued as well. And so here, I'll drop that in the chat right now, the link to that report page. And so if there's an interest at all in improving or reimagining how that report, those annual reports look, or what information they convey, what information is included, we're always eager and interested in understanding those desires and making sure the reports are as effective and communicative as possible. So thanks, Zong. Just wanted to share that update and happy to answer.
And John, before we lose you, John, do you know if in that report you have clarity on the allocation of the resources? So once the money comes into the Air District, is there some sort of indicator of where those funds go afterward?
No, not at this time. That's
Okay.
the report just lists all the violations and the inspections conducted and the complaints received. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep that as an action item. Bianca, to your question of wanting to know where the resources go, that will continue to be an action item follow-up.
Yeah, and we could talk further with Bianca. I don't know if Bianca's here or not, but Bianca, we're more than happy to work with you on understanding how the report can be, again, reimagined to convey the information that would be most helpful for the community. So thank you.
Great. Bianca, does that feel adequate, or do you have any other follow-up questions right now?
Yes, sorry, it's because I have the Spanish inside and the English. And so my question is, it's in regard to the general funding that the district has. We brought it up a couple of times in the past that we wanted to see how much is allocated from those violators to come back to the community. I know that John was mentioning that it helped fund a part of the chimney replacement, but in reality, we do have it in the SERP, so it's kind of like not a 2-for-1. There was already money allocated, but we want to know how much of the rest of the money of the violators does go to all these programs that could potentially help community members. We want clarity, we want transparency from the district, and we don't want to hear that conversation. We want to follow up. We hear that constantly coming from the Air District, and this is another month that we've heard it, and we want clarity. We want clarity, transparency from the funding that is coming into the district, and where does it go? And to be honest, we really wanted to go back to the community that has been affected, because we don't. The residents are the ones that are being affected, but yet we don't even know where that funding goes to. It could go to Stockton or it could go to Fresno and not even have concrete numbers. So I think from here on, I think the district should do a better job in transparency on where funding goes and really allocate a lot of the funding of these violators not to go in the general fund, but go back to the community that has been affected.
Thanks, Bianca. I hear you loud and clear, and I'll communicate with you shortly on after this meeting about how we can best do that through the annual reports or in some other platform or whatever is on your mind.
Great. All right, so we'll keep that as an action item, and it sounds like for tonight, we don't have those data points available, so we'll go ahead and move forward. As I said earlier, we want to try something new and different by engaging non-CSC members at this time. So if the public or other folks that are on tonight's call have a question about anything from the action item tracker, any of these report outs, now would be the time. So I want to make sure there's ample space for folks to jump in and ask any questions. So I'll just give it a second, see if there's any hands raised. If you have questions or comments, you can also put it in the chat. All right, so as the public is thinking about whether or not to ask something, I want to bring something to the attention of all CSC members. So far, it's been over a year that we've been engaging in this note-taking of action items, developing a potential due date with who's responsible for the action item, and then following back with you all as CSC members on how things are going. And we sort of give you this update at the top of every single meeting, and we spend about, as you can see now, about 15-20 minutes on this action item tracker. Want to, if you have the bandwidth now, to provide some space, would love for you all to give us some feedback. We haven't really heard from you all if this process is working for you. Do you want a different way to collect action items and report back? Or is this really working for you and you want to keep having these action items reviewed at the top of every meeting? So just want to plant the seed for that. If you have an immediate reaction, now is the time to respond. If not, we can continue this conversation on the chat or at the agenda setting meeting. I see Michelle's raised her hand. Would love to hear from you, Michelle.
I think the action item tracker is a great tool. I think, though, when I went in this morning to print out my agenda and everything, it wasn't up, the notation wasn't up. So maybe we could do that a little sooner. I mean, I never went back and looked at it because I got busy. And so, but I think it's a great tool, and it's a nice way to summarize the end of the meeting to make sure our what we're talking about is where the direction we want to go.
Great, thank you. So what I'm hearing is maybe post them sooner so that we know what's happening. And then also seeing in the chat that Bianca added, maybe have some check marks, because right now we have a status, but it's not easy to see that visual check mark. So maybe make it a little bit more visually engaging so that you can see that an item has been completed. So we hear you, Bianca, hear you, Michelle. Those are two things that we can immediately fix. Linda?
I do like having it. I agree with Bianca and Michelle. There's so much time in between our meetings, so I think it's a really good reminder of what we all worked on, what we need to work on, and then what has been checked off, and then what we still need to work on. So I would like to keep it.
Great, thank you so much, Linda, for that and for that support of what folks have shared. So we'll make sure to incorporate those edits. So we're going to go ahead and transition to our next agenda item, but please, if you have any other feedback, keep them in the chat and we'll read them out loud and make a notation of them. So for our next agenda item, we'll be talking about the air monitoring update. We're going to spend about 45 minutes or so listening to the air monitoring update regarding the data that's been collected from the air monitoring van while it was at La Colonia, as well as take any suggestions from CSC members about where the van should go next. So we understand the air quality is a major concern for you all, so want to make sure that you are well informed about the status of the findings, and also be ready and prepared to make some recommendations on next steps for where the van should go and what other things should be considered. So at this time, I'm going to pass it to, do I see Robert? I see Robert there. So go ahead. Are you going to share your screen? Yep, I see you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right,
and
good.
We'll, as Robert starts talking, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and then raise your hand and we'll call you when the time comes.
Yeah, thank you. And once again, hello everyone. I'm Robert Gillis, and I'll walk through some of the analysis that was completed using after the van monitoring period that happened last August and September. And I'll do the best I can. I'm definitely open for if anybody's raising hands or has questions in the chat to let me know, and I'll stop. It's not too terribly long, so it could be helpful to see it through, but I'm definitely open to any questions as they come up. That can be a very helpful process. So just to get us started here with the summary of the location during the period starting in about mid-August into about mid-September, the air monitoring van was placed in the La Colonia neighborhood, which is south of Shafter, and this is just an idea of showing the location of where the van was at during that period. and the van was monitoring for PM 2.5 while it was there. So just to jump right in and just a big view overview during that specific period to show the PM 2.5, the average daily concentrations that were measured while the van was parked from mid-August to mid-September, and compare that to the other PM 2.5 data that was collected in the community in the same period. And then also the Bakersfield, California Air Monitoring Station, although it is a ways away, it's more distant. It's also just used, it's a regulatory monitor just for comparison. So in this view, we can see starting, well, firstly, the bold red line represents the La Colonia data. And for most of the period, everything was very comparable to the other air monitoring data that was collected. Actually, even on the lower end of the concentrations that were monitored at the other sites. But of course, very obviously, there are some days where in early September, we do see that the data that was collected, the air quality, the concentration went higher and then much higher. And this is the highest period. The highest date was September 9th during this period. So that was actually also the only day where the average daily concentration exceeded the federal standard. During this time, every other monitoring point was below that federal standard, but we'll go into more details about what we think we see, and definitely soliciting any feedback from the community, anybody that's in the area, of course, and what do you see, and how does this compare? And that can help with, of course, a better understanding of next actions and just because some of the observations from the period that the van was parked. This is another view of the PM 2.5 data, but here it's shown compared to the air quality index. It's a better understanding of the health effects of those concentrations during that time. So there were a total of 28 days that the van was placed and was recording PM 2.5 air quality in La Colonia. And as I had mentioned, the highest reading was recorded on September 9th. And the AQI, the air quality index on that day, was in the unhealthy category, which is represented by the red, which is that range of 55 to 150 micrograms. But we can see just in this color comparison, how did all of the other sites compare during the same period in the AQI format? We can see that mostly everything is yellow and green, which means that the readings were below the federal air quality standard for daily average, except for that one day where we see the red, and that's the unhealthy AQI at La Colonia. And again, the Bakersfield, California site, and then additionally the Corcoran air monitoring site, those are pretty far away, but they are the nearest regulatory air quality monitors that record PM 2.5. So just for comparison, to just try to understand what else is going on, we bring those in here to hopefully show a little bit of helpful comparison. The van is equipped with video surveillance, and so using those cameras, we were able to definitely review, and we can see during the times where we saw the highest concentrations. These are just examples, but we see a lot of dust. I think that might have been, it's pretty easy to connect that the time that the video surveillance shows us dust is the same time that we see the air quality is becoming worse. And I'll show in the next couple of slides some of the hourly comparisons. The previous data that was shown was a 24-hour average, but we see actually a lot of helpful information when we look at hour by hour, how did the concentrations change? But starting off with just seeing that there is easy to see very dusty conditions that are happening. And then some of the evidence of activity that we can see is this example here is just a tractor in agricultural field. This is just another image during this specific day when so September 9th, this is the day when we had the highest average PM 2.5 concentrations in the unhealthy AQI. This is a look at the hourly progression of the PM 2.5 readings. And we can see in the 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. period, these were the time of day where they were the highest readings. These are very high numbers. the 293, 812, and then tapering off to an 85. Those are still pretty high. During those same hours, this is an image that is the example of what we can see on the video surveillance at that same time. So there's definitely a very dramatic increase in the PM 2.5 levels when the on-field activity was happening. And then at some point they returned to normal. And I'll note again that there is a little bit of a second time spike on the same day where at that 6 p.m., at 1800 hour, there was a 50 micrograms reading for the hour. It looks very small compared to the other readings that we show earlier in the morning or that were recorded earlier in the morning, but compared to the hours that are leading up to it and then the hours afterwards, it is also an elevated concentration. So this is another view of the hourly data that was recorded. La Colonia, again, is in the red bold line, but this is also showing all of the other sites that recorded PM 2.5 for comparison. And we can really see that La Colonia by far stands out. This is not something that was common for the area. It was really very specific to just that impacts on the van during that time. And this, just these black boxes are highlighting those same elevated concentration periods that I showed on the previous slide. And so this is visually, definitely these very high spikes can make all the rest of this look pretty small. But we can see here there was an increase at that 1800 hour. It seems to be pretty common at that hour that other sites were increasing though as well. That was not unique to La Colonia. And then that's what this table is showing, just trying to compare the hourly concentrations at all of the PM 2.5 air monitoring sites during those 2 blocks of time, what was going on everywhere else. And we can see 7 a.m., 8 a.m., very clearly La Colonia, those concentrations were the highest out of anything that was observed. Some of the others were elevated. Bakersfield, California was elevated at 89, but again, that's pretty far off and it's not matching as well with the rest of the community monitoring, which was even lower than that. And then that later afternoon period, we can see this increase of hour 18, where we see the 50 micrograms reading. There were other sites though that were elevated at that time, not much higher, but the highest site during that time was recorded at the Shafter Golden Oak air monitoring site. And that was just a 56, so pretty comparable to La Colonia. But again, these are elevated, little more common at that hour for some reason. And then the very last column, the 24-hour average, clear to see that La Colonia, because of these earlier morning concentrations, ended up at the highest for the day, which we saw earlier when we compare the colors. La Colonia had the red unhealthy AQI. And since we're talking about the hourly concentrations for just that one day, this slide now just shows the hourly concentrations for the entire air monitoring period from mid-August to mid-September when the van was in La Colonia. This is just a summary. There were 659 observations. It's just the hourly count of how many hours were recorded during that time. But again, of course, because of this very high hour at 800 micrograms on September 9th, all of this rest of this doesn't look too big. So the next slide just zooms in and kind of cuts that off a little bit. And this is where we can see there actually were other hours where there were elevated concentrations, and then they go down almost right away. Very few spikes, 1 hour at a time, where we do see some of these higher concentrations. And the following slides have just some summaries to help put this into context and what these mean. But we thought this was a potentially helpful view that when we look at the whole period, that very big spike makes everything else look very small, but it is helpful to look at everything else. As we cut off that large spike, we can actually see that there were other times where there were impacts. And PM 2.5.
Robert, this is a really important slide here. Can you remind us of when that peak critical line it should be superimposed in here? Where would that line go? The one that you showed earlier, the threshold.
Oh yeah, all these, since these are hourlies, the previous maybe referring to the horizontal line that was comparing to the federal standard. For sure, I'll help connect these hourly readings. The reason that that's not on here, and it is helpful, is just because that federal standard is a 24-hour average. And so these are hourly concentrations, and it's not exactly comparable to the 24-hour standard. So the next couple of slides, though, we do help try to understand hour by hour, what are the potential health impacts from these concentrations? And hopefully that will be helpful in understanding for everybody, what does this mean and how do we compare it, and what are some of the takeaways? So this is the first slide where we can start to compare what do those hourly concentrations mean. And I'll have to note that these numbers on the graph is actually just a count of the number of hours. We're trying to get an idea of the frequency of most of the time during this period. The air quality was recorded at a ROR level 1, which is the best air quality, is the lowest concentrations. So hopefully this is coming across well. You know, sometimes I look at this and say, oh, maybe actually the larger number doesn't look as good. But in this case, on this slide, this is the larger number is interpreted as being, this is the greater period of time where the air quality was good. And then there were the ROR level 2, which is still in this moderate level 2 category, is the next greatest number of observations were in that category. And then when we see more concern, I think, just in general to sensitive individuals, and then of course more unhealthy conditions and more hazardous conditions. So the level 3, 4, and 5, if we focus just on those in this graph, we see that there were only 14 hours that were recorded, and they were not at all consecutive hours. They were just 14 hours during the 659 total hours where we saw concentrations at level 3 and above. So I have a couple more slides that help to show the same data in some different ways. This is just a pie chart to show those same concentration numbers, but just to put it as a percentage that during that period, 73% of the time, the air quality was in ROR level 1, and then another 24% of the time ROR level 2, and then about 3% of the time is when we see concentrations that were in the ROR level 3 and above. So these are not to take away from the importance of those very high concentrations that were observed, especially in this ROR level 5, but just as an overall context of how often are these occurring, this is what we're seeing. So I can go back to any of those, but just to summarize, during that period, hourly concentrations that were ROR level 3 and above happened about 2 to 3% of the time from mid-August to mid-September. And then the highest concentrations were observed on September 9th. And it appears that that happened at a time when dust from nearby fields was blowing toward the van, but toward La Colonia. And then except for on that one date, the other concentrations were really similar to other nearby air monitoring sites. So that's just a summary of the data that we were able to see from that period when the van was operating out there from mid-August to mid-September. Hopefully that's helpful. And if there's...
Yeah, Robert, I can read you a couple questions that you have in the chat. So the first one is from Bianca, wanting to know what happens, what's the action that's associated with days when you have those high levels of PM? What do you do when they're high?
What would an individual do, or what are the actions?
I think as the air district, once you record a high level, like what is the action what's the follow-up after that?
Sure. So I'm just going to go to the next slide, because definitely I think this is part of the conversation. The first bullet that we're hoping to just cover is any feedback from the community on how severe these, but also how frequent these observations are for those that are in the area or similar areas. When we see the dust real high, of course, the van was out there for about 28 days, about 4 weeks. And what we were able to do in the time from the van monitoring was to just review for any non-compliance or any enforcement action that might be needed. And there was no findings of non-compliance from the surrounding areas during that time. And then also, sorry to skip around, that's actually the third bullet. So the second bullet there is just that we do expect that as so much low dust equipment has been implemented through grants and incentive grants, that as these harvest seasons occur, that hopefully there would be those really local improvements to the visibility of dust in those time periods. So in the action on what happens when the high concentrations are recorded, these are some of the thoughts, mostly on the enforcement side, is we have the data from that monitoring period. We're able to review, is there any non-compliance or evidence of non-compliance in the area? And there were no findings of non-compliance.
Great. And then in the level 2 of the AQI, how is sensitive individual determined? How do you operationalize that?
Yeah, I think I don't want to speak to that I have exact specifics. I think if somebody does know that they have extra sensitivity to the air quality being poor in this level, maybe they have a condition that they're aware of, or they know that they have difficulty breathing, then these are the types of just guidelines that help. This would be not as common. I think that there definitely are people that would be sensitive at the level 2, but it would be less usual, and then maybe a little bit more common if the air quality was at a level 3 condition, that somebody could be sensitive to those conditions. And then level 4, it's expected that most people would be sensitive to the air quality and have some kind of effects. And then definitely at level 5, pretty much anybody would expect to have effects of breathing that air during that time. I hope that helps.
And maybe
Robert,
I can help maybe add a little bit. Traditionally, yeah, everything Robert said is correct. Traditionally, level 1 and level 2, and that's sort of, you noticed that the standard is 35 and level 1 and level 2 are below 35. So traditionally noted as, although one is level 1 is the best, level 2 is typically not going to trigger an event. And for those sensitive individuals, generally is defined as like younger folks, so folks like youth, folks under 18, and older individuals over 65, and then folks with cardiopulmonary, meaning like breathing or lung issues or diseases. But to Robert's point, level 2 is more for like exceptionally sensitive. So maybe folks that are like more triggered by those, maybe they're really severely maybe they have layers of multiple things going on. Maybe they're young and they have multiple health issues. And then level 3 is more for the folks like it's pretty much folks that have asthma or those sorts of issues. So that's kind of the differentiator there.
Yeah, thanks, Jess.
Great. Yeah, I think it would be helpful if you all could maybe send a link to something. We can make that an action item so folks can have that definition available. And then my other question from Bianca is, Robert, does the Air District give permits to growers when there's harvesting season?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And there are not permitted actions or any permitting for on-field harvesting activities or on-field planting activities. The on-field activities of themselves are not permitted. There are rules and regulations that can cross over into some of the off-field activities. And so when I shared the summary that there were no evidence discovered of non-compliance, that's what we're able to look for is, are any of the surrounding agricultural lands covered under any kind of permit or rule requirement that the district has that would be applicable. And when we see that maybe there is somebody that has a plan or a permit or something, then it's a little easier to follow up on those exact requirements. But that is a category. On-field activities do not have permitting requirements. And so it definitely, I think this is an opportunity for sure. I want to continue to say that we solicit that anytime if there's observations of anything going on, give the district a call or connect with us. That helps us to better connect with the activity that's going on and have a person there to speak with the people that are creating the dust, or just to try to investigate what's going on there a little bit more. And another note on next steps that I wanted to add, this is something that I didn't get into the presentation slide, but that the continuing of monitoring in La Colonia is still in progress. So that means that the PM 2.5 monitor, not the van, but a monitor installation is still in progress. There's just been some delays with the utility companies, so the contractor is still continuing to work those out, and that's expected to happen as soon as those delays with the utility company can be worked out.
Thank you, Robert, for that update. I do see one more question for you, Robert. So would vegetative barriers between the fields and the wind direction and the residential area help us or help as a possible next step?
I can help answer that, Robert. That's actually one of the things we want to talk about tonight in our slides is vegetative barriers. And I'll just say the short answer is yes, that could be certainly a helpful solution. And as you know, we'll give an update a little bit later that we do have an open vegetative barriers request for proposal, meaning folks can apply to get funding to plant trees. And that's one of the places a lot of you have suggested. And I think hearing from Robert's team and the compliance team that we didn't see any issues related to air district rules or regulations, we can get creative with some solutions, right? And maybe that's another next step.
Yeah, thank you, Jess.
Thank you both. We'll make sure to bring that comment back, Steve, when we talk about that next. Linda, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I did see your hand earlier. So I want to make sure that you got your question or concern addressed before we move forward.
It's okay. We were going through the presentation and I was just kind of curious about what some of the numbers were and then exactly what was going on. He answered that question and I was just having it relate to that app that you guys have. But I figured it out. So thank you.
And then one final note, I appreciate the discussion too. And just before we move on, I see another hand for sure. We can talk about that. But Chai Tao had just a couple of updates on some monitoring items too, real quick things. But I just wanted to mention that before we move on in the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert, for making space. Chai, we'll have Maria Anabel go next before you go. Anabel.
Sí, buenas tardes. Gracias por la oportunidad. Estaban hablando sobre las vallas verdes, ¿verdad? La semana pasada estuvimos con... Oh, ok. Entonces, ¿de qué estaban hablando del monitoreo también?
Sí. Yes.
Yo tuve una conversación con Dora y Dora me dijo que ella desde más de un año que ya firmó el papel para su terreno ahí, ya está el contrato, ya está hecho desde hace más de un año, que fueron a ver lo de la electricidad y parece que la electricidad ya está o no sé, pero que ella ya no ha visto seguimiento, ni siquiera han ido a preguntarle nada. Entonces, ¿hay alguien ahí que es el que no está viendo con comunicación o no hay una conversación entre el aire o los Dora o los que tienen que hacer el trabajo? Pero ella dice que ella está dispuesta, lo que pasa que nadie se ha comunicado con ella. Entonces yo le dije, pues nos surge, Dora, le dije, tú sabes que tu comunidad y la de aquí, pues nos surge eso. Le dije, porque mientras está pasando el tiempo y la contaminación sigue. Entonces me dijo, sí, yo voy a... No sé si ahorita, no sé por qué no entró a la junta, pero sí me gustaría que alguien pudiera explicar algo. De perdida pasar al corriente para yo el día que la vea también poder conversar con ella. Gracias.
Voy a hacer un comentario. Mi nombre es Maribel Valle. Con referente a ustedes pueden mirar qué tanta contaminación hubo septiembre 9. Y se me hace bien curioso porque a ese lado donde está la escuela no están tan cerca los files. Entonces es como un poco confuso pensar por qué hay tanta contaminación en esa área y a esas horas. Habría que averiguar exactamente por qué razón esa área hubo tanta contaminación si esa parte en sí no tiene files cerca. Para mí es preocupante porque hay tanto niño enfermo y de verdad se me hace bien curioso el área y la clase de contaminación. Ok, otra cosa, hemos venido hablando de las vallas vegetativas. Eso podría ser que ese polvo o esa contaminación haya volado si es que hubo viento. Si ya se hubieran implementado las vallas verdes en los files, como hemos venido diciendo desde hace tiempo, esta contaminación no llegara a esta área donde llegó, que es una escuela donde tanto niño está a esa hora de la mañana, está todo el día. Entonces, por eso hay tanto niño enfermo. Y yo sé que estamos pidiendo las vallas vegetativas verdes a los rancheros que se les dio dinero, incluso a los que no se les haya dado, para que miren la importancia de lo que realmente estamos diciendo, porque si esa escuela, esa área no tiene files cerca, ¿de dónde vino tanta contaminación? La saca el viento, porque cuando los tractores trabajan en los árboles, los files, todo ese polvo se levanta, toda esa contaminación avanza lejos. Yo agradecería que por favor nos ayuden de verdad a exigir las vallas verdes para que esto no esté pasando, porque como ustedes mismos pueden ver y están diciendo que no encontraron de dónde, les aseguro que si todos los files hubieran vallas verdes, no hubiera esta clase de contaminación tan elevada como la tenemos. Y ustedes mismos están mirando los números. No les estamos diciendo nosotros a ustedes, ustedes nos los están mandando a nosotros. Otra cosa, si fue en septiembre, ¿por qué hasta ahorita nos están mandando los resultados que ya estamos a febrero? Yo creo que cuando hay una contaminación tan alta, debería de ser la información más rápida, no tan lento. Incluso, ¿cómo notificar a los padres? Debería de haber algo, cómo notificar a los padres de emergencia que está tan malo el clima, tanto niño que padece de asma en este pueblo y no, los padres ignoran y simplemente los están llevando a los doctores y los doctores medicándolos, siendo que estamos mirando que esto está viniendo de los files, los químicos, todo. Entonces yo creo que está en nuestras manos de que solo miramos, sabemos, pero no tomamos acción, y eso para mí es como injusto, que solo se repite y se repite. Es como una bolita que la movemos y la movemos, pero no la movemos donde debe de ir. Yo pienso que es tiempo que tomemos acción y protejamos a los niños y pidamos, exijamos vallas verdes. Definitivamente no podemos extender más esto. Gracias.
Thank you all for sharing your actionable recommendations. So want to just make space, Anabel and Maria, so that we can make sure that we continue the conversation about vegetative barriers, because that's an actionable recommendation in the next item, and make sure that all of your comments are noted and recognized by the Air District regarding this agenda item that we're talking about. So Chai, I'm going to pass it to you to provide some context and some answers. And Robert, feel free to jump in.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I can provide some clarification on Annabelle's question. So, we have been keeping a pretty tight communication with the contractor who is working with PG&E, and also actually with Dora too. In fact, I spoke to Dora last week, and she said she was very confused. That it seems like somebody had mentioned that they heard that she was not really working with us, and that's why there's been delay. But that's untrue, and we have been still continue to work closely with Dora on this effort. We're emailing and communicating to each other. And again, the biggest holdback right now is PG&E going through their process, the contractor working with them. It's just been a long time that they're going through that process, unfortunately. But there is no electrical there at that house, at that property. So that has to be taken off of another pole located off-site of that property. And so it's going to take some effort and some permitting, potentially even city permitting and all of that. So it's a little bit complicated, but we are keeping close communication with each other. And Dora has been really, really great to work with, very responsive, and we're working through this. So hopefully in the next few months, we'll see how that progresses. But we're dealing with the issues with PG&E as they come along, and communicating with each other on this. And then I can move on to the next topic. I think Annabelle had brought this up as well with the CSC about some concern with odors and smell nearby Laredo Highway and Highway 99, and that if we could get a van over there to do some monitoring to figure out what's going on, And the CSC had recommended that we reach out to the wonderful company and see if perhaps we could place our van at their office. And so I had reached out to John Quinn of the wonderful company, and he's been, I think he's here tonight too, but he's been very responsive and very helpful. So really want to thank him for that. Gave us some good options, and then also hooked us up to the City of Shafter, working with Michael Jones, who's the Public Works Director there. And we found a location, which is a water tank just right south of that, of their office, that we had originally were thinking about. In fact, it's a better location because the office has some vegetation around it, so monitoring there will be a little bit more difficult. Whereas, and I could show you a quick map just so that everybody can see where we're thinking about putting it. Oops, did I put it the wrong one? Oh, let's see. Hold on, let me try that again. Let's see here. Okay. All right, can everyone see the map? So originally we're thinking about the office here, but there's some vegetation around here, and so the option now is we're looking at this location here, and this is going to be really ideal for the van because there's a fence around it. It's locked up, so we can take the van in there. We can leave it for 2 or 3 weeks there, and just continue the monitoring and really see what's going on there. So that's the plan right now, and we're working out some logistics on it. And this one, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we'll get the vans up and running and going long term on there. And we're even we're at this point thinking that this could be a site that we can continue to, since it is fully secured, that we can continue to go there for long term monitoring for a couple of weeks as we move to those sites, and we can come back to this site. So I think that's going to be something that we're going to be shooting for. So that's the location, and that's what our plan is for it. So yeah, if you have any other thoughts or any concerns, yeah, please let us know.
Hi, I'm seeing a comment from Bianca. I think it's a confirmation comment of the company Wonderful is helping out to place a monitor on Lerdo Highway. So that's what you said. I think she's just confirming.
Yes. Because originally we were going to do it at their office, but yeah, they definitely have been helping us on this, and it wouldn't have been possible without their assistance. And specifically John. So thanks, John.
Yeah. Great. And so I just want to come back to one other question before we transition to talking about the CERT. So also heard a question from, I think it was Maria, who asked about like a reporting structure. Are there any plans to alert the community when PM2 gets that elevated peak level that you talked about, Robert? And is that something that's going to be discussed at a later time?
I can help address a little bit of that, because that's just something we've been working on, like on a district-wide basis when it comes to our community air monitoring. So as of right now, it was a little bit different because that was a van. So one of the main things that will be changed once we work out all of the kind of complicated stuff that Chai was just explaining is that La Colonia will have a monitor that's hooked up to our real-time network, where you can all go on at any point and see what the concentrations are, which is different. Before, to maybe answer the other question, we went back because it was done with a mobile monitoring van, and we did analysis sort of after the fact because it wasn't like our live data in the same exact fashion. We are working district-wide, I'll just say, and maybe Robert has more information on this, to kind of overhaul how we do some of our alerting to the public. As you know, right now we have RAN, and right now there is a Shafter monitor hooked up to that site. So like if you have our app, you can get alerts. But I think we're just kind of exploring what to do and how to do it with the community air monitoring. Robert, I'm sure you have even more information than I do.
No, that was about all I was going to say, or that I could contribute as well, is that it's an ongoing effort to explore. And right now, the community air monitoring sites are not directly hooked up to any immediate real-time notification process. It's just the real-time data, as Jess had said, is in La Colonia, will come on the webpage once that site that Chai is discussing, once those logistical issues are resolved, then at least that will be available at that level on the webpage. But thanks, Jess, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. So at this point, we're going to ask for any public comment or questions that you may have about this presentation before we transition to our SERP updates. So I'm just going to give it about 30 seconds looking around for any raised hands or comments from the public about this agenda item. Also checking our live stream on YouTube and not seeing any comments at this time. All right, well, I'll take that as indication as moving forward, as an opportunity to move forward. So our next agenda item is an update on the SERP measure implementation. As you all know, it's critically important for you all to monitor the implementation of the SERP. And so the Air District is going to provide us with an update on how things are going. And as the update is being provided, we want to make sure that folks have ample time to provide their input and provide any opportunities for constructive feedback. So please do raise your hand like before or add to the chat. So the momentum will continue after today's conversation as we continue with implementation of the SERP. So at this time, I'm going to pass it to Zong.
You can pass it to me.
Or Jess, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No worries. Thank you, Dr. Ramos. I'm actually going to reintroduce in some cases, a couple of key partners. One is she is a member of our CSC, Janet Herrera with Central California Asthma Collaborative, and she is here with a name that sounds familiar, but just with a different location attached, with Gustavo Aguirre Jr., who is now with CCAC. One of your SERP measures that we have talked about a lot and we've implemented in some ways, but we have a lot more to do, and there's some really cool new resources to leverage, is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And in this case, particularly like for residents to use, so not like for school buses. CCAC came to us and had just kind of some great opportunities to introduce to us and maybe collaborate with the group on. And so we're just grateful to have them here. I'll pass it to Gus, I think, and they actually have a presentation to share, and hopefully folks got the presentation kind of in the materials that we sent out as well. So go ahead, Gus.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Hello again. For those that don't know me, my name is Gustavo Aguirre Jr., previously a CSC member for chapter AB617, also previously the Kern County Director for Central California Environmental Justice Network, or CCJN. Since then, since the beginning of this year, I've actually now the Associate Director for Climate and Environmental Justice Programs at the California Asthma Collaborative. So very excited to be here. My work alongside Jeanette's is mainly focused looking at the SERP and looking at different opportunities that we could capitalize on, and opportunity happens to be in front of us, but I'll let Jeanette introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Gus, and thank you, Jessica. So my name is Janet Herrera. I am the Climate and Environmental Justice Senior Coordinator for the Central California Asthma Collaborative. And I would like to reintroduce CCAC for those of you who may have heard of us but don't know what we do, or just in general. I'd like to sort of highlight the work that CCAC does in the community. To start, our mission is to provide education and direct services, build regional capacity, and advocate for sensible policies that improve health and address inequities by reducing environmental impacts and emphasizing the prevention and management of chronic disease. So we do asthma education, and we have various other programs that align with our mission. So if you can go on to the next slide. So I'm just going to go over some of the programs that we have and projects that we have here at CCAC, and then I'll hand it off to Gustavo, who is going to be sharing some exciting information about electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and hopefully see where that conversation takes us with the CSC in terms of collaboration in the future. So one of CCAC's flagship programs is the Comprehensive Asthma Remediation and Education Services Program. This was formerly known as AIM, which was the Asthma Impact Model, now known as CARES. So this program is aimed at asthmatics in the Valley who have uncontrolled asthma. It's meant for Medi-Cal members and uninsured members who have, or uninsured people in the Valley who have asthma. And as you may all know, the air quality isn't the best, which contributes to high asthma rates, among other things that contribute to the asthma rates in the San Joaquin Valley. So through this program, we are able to partner with Medi-Cal plans in seven of the counties in the San Joaquin Valley, which includes here in Kern County, Kern Family Healthcare and HealthNet as of now. So we are able to get patients referred to our asthma remediation program. We have community health workers that go out to the home of these asthma members or asthma patients. They provide asthma education in their home. They do a home environmental assessment to identify triggers inside of their home, and they provide education on these indoor air triggers. So when we go out to people's homes, we don't just tell them like, oh, dust is triggering your asthma or mold is triggering your asthma. We also teach them how to reduce those triggers inside the home. And the way that we do that is we provide the remediation tools like an air purifier, air filters for the HVAC system, asthma-friendly cleaning supplies, mattress covers that are allergen and dust proof, and among other tools. And it's all free for members because it's covered either through Medi-Cal, or for uninsured folks, we do have funds that we can use to be able to provide them these remediation tools. And so for some of the climate and environmental programs that we have at CCAC, we have the Clean Vehicle Empowerment Collaborative and the EV Equity Program, which kind of go hand in hand. So the EV Equity Program is a program where we help San Joaquin Valley residents tap into state and federal funds to be able to get incentives and rebates to afford an electric vehicle. So we really do help them with the process of knowing the benefits of having an electric vehicle, how they can charge their electric vehicle, the locations of EV chargers. We also work with people with finance assistance, and also it's a personalized support that we give to SJV residents. So the Clean Vehicle Empowerment Collaborative is a group of CBOs, community-based organizations across the San Joaquin Valley who work in their counties to do targeted outreach to low to middle income people in these communities to make sure that they are getting appropriate education on the benefits of electric vehicle, and talking about myths that people have about electric vehicles and connecting them to our EV equity program. And we also, we participate in AB617 activities like the CSCs, and other air grants that we have through AB617 include community air grants, where we do local CSCs, very similar to what the air district does. We work with their district and with CARB to try to not reinvent the wheel, but use similar processes to bring local community steering committees to other disadvantaged communities that were not selected as part of CAP. And so Cal EVIP, it's the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Project, which is what Gustavo is going to be talking about, where we talk about rebates for installing publicly accessible charging stations, and this is through CEC. Some of the research projects that we do here at CCAC include Summation. This is local to Kern County. This is a project for methane monitoring in Kern County. And the reason why CCAC is involved in this is because methane, which is also known as natural gas, also co-emits harmful air toxics, for example, BTEX, and we really are interested in finding out and trying to find methods to be able to quantify BTEX from methane emissions in Kern County. So I hope that wasn't too much, but if you guys have any questions about these programs, you want to refer asthmatics with uncontrolled asthma to our program, please feel free to reach out to us. You can visit our website, learn more about these various projects. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Gustavo.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the next 5 slides have a lot of information in them. And so I'm not going to go over them in great detail. We made these for you all to kind of go through, but I'll just quickly touch over what I do. So part of my responsibilities now at CCAC is to look at how the California Energy Commission is rolling out all these hundreds of millions of dollars in electric vehicle infrastructure. And they're doing this through the Cali VIP program. So similar to AB617 program within a state agency, rolling out of this money right here in Shafter, we have a SERP, we have $30 million roughly, and there's different strategies. So Cali VIP is very similar. It's a program that is sponsored by the state and is rolling out throughout the state of California electric vehicle infrastructure, essentially electric charging stations, right? So if you guys ever drive up and down the 5 or the 99, or in various communities, there's electric vehicle infrastructure. So like, charging banks where folks plug in their electric vehicles. This money is set aside to be rolled out, particularly in disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. So oftentimes very much aligned with AB617 communities that are overburdened with pollution. So Cal-E VIP is a program that I'll be sharing and talking to you about today. I believe you go to the next slide. So this map, again, very small, but we sent it in the slides and hopefully is attached to you all. Cali VIP, it works in coordination with many different agencies and partners, mainly the utilities, which are PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. It's working with jurisdictions. So the city of Shafter, the county of Kern, those are examples of jurisdictions. It's working with EV service providers, so electric vehicle service providers. So this is ChargePoint, EVgo, Tesla. These are all companies that own the infrastructure for electric vehicles charging stations. And then what this map represents here is through the governor's office, through GoBiz, they're creating what are called streamlined permitting processes, maps. And so green means that areas are streamlined to permit and roll out EV infrastructure, electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Yellow are communities that are in the process of going and being streamlined, and red are areas that have yet to be streamlined. And essentially what that means is creating a checklist, like an ordinance, for example, and making a checklist of how private investors, community groups could bring together electric vehicle infrastructure. And so part of our responsibility at the Asthma Collaborative is turning these red places into yellow and then green places, right? These maps are important because private investors, public entities, public investments are going to be rolled out in the millions and millions of dollars in communities that primarily are green, that are ready to be streamlined in permitting, right? What you guys are looking at is a community, the red is the city of Shafter. That's the yellow circle around it. Wasco is up in yellow, and then Delano is in green, and then in red, I'm sorry, and the whole green around it is the county of Kern. So the county of Kern actually is streamlined for this infrastructure to be rolled out. Essentially what that means, on their website, they have very easy places to find the checklist to apply for a permit and have an ordinance that it makes it very easy for folks to get permits, okay? And so we could go to the next slide. Here in the city of Shafter, through the AB617 program, we actually have a pretty amazing opportunity to capitalize on this opportunity of the Cali VIP program. One is because there's an electric vehicle charging infrastructure SERP in the AB617 for Shafter, and that's nearly $800,000 plus of money dedicated for electric vehicle infrastructure, something that we all voted for. And so it's able to go and make sure that communities, private entities, business owners could go and apply for this money. And what Cali VIP really does, it pays for 50%, so almost half of the entire project. And in the community of Shafter, we have nearly $850,000 for electric vehicle infrastructure. The Air District, the Valley Air District, has its own program similar to Cali VIP, in that they are able to match fundings or cover some of the of projects through charge-up programs at the Valley Air District, that they could in fact cover up to potentially up to 50% of a project, right? And so in the city of Shafter, we have $800,000 per se of money that has already been allotted for electric vehicle infrastructure. We have two programs. One is obviously the CERP in Shafter, but also the Charger program, which potentially could waive some of those capping funds and cover up to 50% of the project. And then we also have the state program, Cali VIP, that would cover the other 50% of a project, right? And so just doing just basic breakdowns, we could, this program is made specifically for level 3 chargers. And so those are like, you know, for every 30 minutes of charging, you know, you get triple what you would do an overnight charge in your house, right? And so these are level 3 chargers. So they're DCSF, they're direct circuit fast chargers, so DC fast chargers, as often we will be calling them. And these DC fast chargers, you know, if you run into, say, a clinic for 30 minutes, by the time you come out, you'll have, you know, 100 miles plus of travel time, right? So these chargers are made to be very fast chargers. They're made to maximize opportunity. So probably not something you're going to have in your household, right? Because in your household, you couldn't do overnight charging, but this is something you might see in community centers, in libraries, or in other spots, right? So so as my job at CCAC, part of my responsibility is to look at the rollout of this money. There's an opportunity here in Shafter, and I just want to make sure that I share that with you all, so we could maybe at some point have a discussion of how we could capitalize on this, right? How we could be the first community in all of California that has the most electric vehicle infrastructure per capita. I think, and on top of this is something we haven't talked about, is the $6 million that we have for electric vehicle programs. And so coupled on top of this electric vehicle infrastructure is this electric vehicle $6 million incentive that we have for Shafter. And so it presents an amazing opportunity to really start, you know, as I think in 2035, certain vehicles will be won't be sold in the market, right? Which will be fossil fuel vehicles. And so Shafter will be looking at this opportunity to really meet the demands of the future, right? And so this is just something that we wanted to speak about. If you could go to the next slide, please. The next couple of slides do breakdown on the rebates, which we won't talk a lot about that, but again, these are this state Cali VIP could cover up to 50% of a project, right? And so the city of Shafter is already looking at potentially rolling out DC fast chargers. They could definitely take advantage of this opportunity to give 50% from the state of coverage, and then potentially another good chunk up to 50% from the AB617 CERT money that we already have allotted here, right? And so, you know, I think it's a very much an amazing opportunity. If we go to the next slide, amazing opportunity, you know, for us in Shafter to do so. Cali VIP, right now we're in the 2.0 version. The first version of this installed nearly $40 million of incentive money to go in the communities of California. That's nearly 3,000 electric vehicle connectors, so chargers. And we have so much more money to roll out, right? And so this is just an opportunity. Again, this is a state program that could be stacked on top of AB 617 and Air District money to really maximize the opportunity that we could have here in Shafter. And we've already had some very preliminary meetings with the Air District, and they said as long as the appetite from the residents is there, they're more than willing to have these conversations, right? The only thing is the deadline for applications for this cycle ends in March, but then it reopens within the next year. So next year it will reopen. And so we could have these discussions now. We could start looking at potential locations. I know we all have friends in the business community. We could start, maybe some of them have been wanting to host electric vehicle infrastructure, but have yet to, to get the capital. Well, we have this opportunity here. Our contact information for Jeanette and myself is here. And so if there's any questions now or in the future, we would love to circle back with this. We're working with the Air District, like I said, very preliminary conversations already, but we would love to extend this conversation out to the city of Marvin and other stakeholders that might be interested in learning more about Cali VAP. We've done a ton of homework. The last month, all I did was learn about this program. So unfortunately, I have tons of useless information of this program, but I have tons of information. So for whoever's ready, we have technical assistance programs. We have technical folks that will literally guide folks through the application process from start to finish, and to roll this information out. Again, it was my pleasure. If there's any questions, I would love to take them. But also, our contact information is here so we hopefully establish this seed of ideas of hey, there's this obvious opportunity here. We could definitely take advantage of this, and then bring this very much needed resources to these communities, right? Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Gus. Really appreciate you and Janet sharing tonight. Maybe we can get some general impressions from CSC members. Any comments now? Because I heard that the application is due in March. So I'm not sure what day in March, if that's before or after the next CSC meeting. So maybe we can just get some general feedback today.
Gus, can you reiterate that point about March and then sort of the multiple rounds of the phases of the project?
Yes. So there's different phases. There's different opportunities to apply. And again, primarily the focus of this money, which in each phase is $30 million, is to roll it out particularly in communities that are disadvantaged communities. So SB 535, designated communities to be disadvantaged. And there's a map. Cal Virus Screen is a great place to check that out. And the other thing, it has to be a low income community, right? So it has to meet the federal poverty guidelines, which we have a map that literally overlays federal poverty guidelines with disadvantaged communities. And it gives us the communities that this program qualifies for. And so for the first phase, it's the entire Central Valley and Southern California, which is Los Angeles, Orange County, San Diego area. So those are the two regions that will be focused on for round one. Round two is Northern California, so all the northern area and the Bay Area. And then phase three, which will be next year, brings it back to the Central Valley and the Imperial Valley, which we have partners in Imperial that we're already working on. Maybe some of you know them. I think someone from the Hard Airing Company took off and is working with some of those folks now. And we already actually met. Daniela and I we actually have a meeting tomorrow about that. So very exciting stuff. So each phase, it gives an opportunity of 45 days for applicants to apply. The California Energy Commission is the person that takes all this information in. They're the ones that decide who receives the money, all that good stuff. But again, it's meant for very particularly disadvantaged communities and low-income communities, so we could roll out this infrastructure there, because it's already rolled out in the Bay, it's already in LA, it's already in these different places, right? But it's just not here in our communities, right? And if the state is pushing, and if science is elaborating, and if we're knowing that, cars are contributing so much to the pollution, and we need to step away from that. We need to make sure that our communities are not left behind, right? If these maps are being created for private investment and public investment, and our communities are red, we're being left out of the economic process, right? We're being left out of this infrastructure, billions of dollars of infrastructure money that's coming into our communities, right? So the first thing, part of my responsibility is to make sure that these communities that are red turn yellow and then green, right? That way we open up public and private investment into these communities. And so, yeah, so if we don't get it within the first 45 days, that's okay. We could start having these conversations unless there's already a site host that we know, unless there's a business that it's ready to go, and we have permits in place. That's okay. We don't have to have that. This is just rolling out. And so for the first 45 days, it's the Central Valley. And then next year, and then obviously after that, then there's a rollout of who gets the money, where to roll out. And then after that, next year, it comes back to the Central Valley. And so then maybe next year, we're ready to roll out with this, right? This infrastructure. Hopefully it's already out by then, but if not, we'll have another opportunity to capitalize on the incentive programs that are coming in from the state.
And I'll, Dr. Ramos, if I can just help clarify kind of where the CSC comes into play here a little bit. And I do see John's question. So yeah, as Gus, thank you so much, Gus and Janet. When Gus and Janet came to us and talked about this program, there were kind of two aspects, and Gus just outlined them really well. One is, if anyone, and I see John Gwynn has raised his hand, and we obviously have the city on the call. If anyone on this call is ready, this is like, go. We don't even, of course, you'll get the district funding from if it's in the boundary, of course, which I believe most of us are. You can get the up to 25,000 from the district through the SERP. You can work with Gus to work with Cali VIP and get half the funding there. And then there's a little bit of funding you'd have to make up for, but that would be awesome. The second aspect, and sort of one of the things Gus was talking about in his slides, is if we as a CSC, either today or at some future meeting, to set us up for next year's funding, want to make the decision or recommendation, at least to the district's board, to remove the funding cap or raise the funding cap, that right now the district only funds up to 25,000. I actually have a quick little slide to just illustrate it. It's not super illustrative, but it's a kind of a reminder of what Gus just said. Are you all seeing the slide? It sort of just has a couple of, as a reminder, Gus just said, this is what we have. I just also put this, which is the vehicle replacement that Gus mentioned. This is separate from the funding, but it's a reminder that it goes hand in hand. Right now, that's 25,000 per charger that we give. If we as a CSC want to change that, it wouldn't change the amount in here, but it would mean more people would most likely be able to take advantage. Because as of right now, as you can see, we've only been able to do 2% of this measure. That's because right now we don't fund 100%. So folks have to come to the table with money. And as we know, especially recently, just things are more expensive and it's really difficult, especially if they're a private business owner or even, as we work with other entities. So there's kind of two things. One is if we can find partners now, that'd be amazing. But in the meantime, we as a CSC, if we want to support this change, then the district can go to our board and say, hey, look, this is the best way to work with CCAC and the state. This would essentially, right, Gus, this would almost make it like free of charge or close to it, right? If we change this funding.
Yeah, definitely. So it would cover essentially, each charger, the DC fast chargers for each unit is nearly $100,000. The state will cover $50,000 of that. And if collectively we say, this is an amazing opportunity for Shafter, let's remove the funding cap from 25 to 50,000, then it would essentially cover the vast majority of the project, essentially, yes.
Perfect. So I just wanted to clarify that we don't have to make a decision today. I know this is the first time you're hearing about it, but I just want folks to know that's sort of one of the things we're talking about. But I do want to get to John's question or comment.
Yeah, there's so much information and so many questions still. So Gus, I'm assuming that if as far as ownership goes, application, all of the things that it takes to put this together, we can just get a hold of you. Who's the best resource? You to get a hold of to?
yes, part of my 50% of my portfolio at this organization for now, it's this. So and there is, like you said, ownership and utilization. There's a variation of business models that various service providers offer. If you want hands off, you just want to give sell the land. If you want to be fully integrated and be owner and operator and recipient of this, whatever business model folks are more attracted to, the depending on the service provider, there's different business models available. So yes, please, if there is any further questions, particularly and very specifically to Cali VIP, yes, please feel free to reach out to me.
All right, thanks. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much, Sal.
Anyone else have any questions for today? Including the public or any other folks?
Thank you for the
online?
opportunity to present.
Thanks, Gus. Nice seeing you again. All right. Well, I think the Air District, Jess, we have some other updates on the SERP that we'd like to go over. And I do see Steve's hand.
Please, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Steve with the city. Yeah, I'm going to talk to my public works director. I don't know if March is something we could commit to, but if there's more opportunities for funding later down the line, yes. Let me talk to my public works director, who's more connected with the EV and what's going on with the city, and see if we can leverage this as well. And I'll like what John said, I'll follow up with Mr. Aguirre.
Yeah, please do. As far as timeline, again, because there's such a short rollout, they're testing the 45-day period to see if it's like wild or if they get enough applications in and they fund it. But yeah, as far as timeline, there's definitely, if we don't meet the March 10th, there's definitely opportunity to get it in the next round, and that will give us enough time for utility plans, designs, permits, etc. So it's not, don't think of it as a one opportunity. It's definitely something that will be rolled out. So yes, our contact information is in the slide at the end of it, but I'll also type it up here in the chat.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. It's exciting to see this potential collaboration and excited to hear any follow-ups at the next meeting. So with that said, I'll pass it back to Jess to provide us with some other SERP implementation updates.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'm just going to jump right into the first one, which is air filtration. But those of you, Zong will drop in the chat, and then those that receive materials, you'll see the full materials. The first 2 slides are just intro slides. So I'll just jump right in, and I have a couple of updates that are even more updated than what I'm sharing today. So just as a reminder, there's an air filtration measure in September, and really we talked about it all summer and even before 2022 about adding a new indoor air filtration measure. And we sort of had 2 measures we knew weren't moving along. One of them was the school air filtration measure, which we found out that the schools had a bunch of other funding coming in. And so we all agreed to move that to a residential measure. And we also have funding from a locomotive measure. As you know, that hasn't moved. We used some of that funding for our vegetative barriers measure. And so we're proposing a $1 million indoor air filtration measure for residents. We submitted a project plan to CARB for approval, and we actually we believe approval is within the next few days. We've heard a lot, and I'm going to show you on the next slide what that kind of generally included. But as you remember, if anything wasn't in the CAP or community air protection guidelines, CARB, or the California Air Resources Board, has to approve a separate project plan. So that's what that process is. Today, I'll just give you a quick update on what the measures are and ask for a little bit of feedback on how we can engage folks moving forward. But we can also continue this discussion if we don't have a lot of time today. And then there's 2 more steps to this besides getting feedback and getting the project plan approved. The first is that because this is new to the district and because it wasn't in our SERP, we actually are also required to go to our governing board for approval. I'm happy to update you all that we're actually going to take this to our board on Thursday. We're going to make sure that this is a quick process. We want to get going and get residential air filtration units to everyone that we can in Shafter before summer and before things really get hopefully not too bad with wildfire smoke. And then there's a little bit of process after that where we have to kind of do what we're doing with vegetative barriers and put out a request for quotations just to get the best available pricing for units. So if you remember we did a few months ago residents, and I think many of you took advantage where we gave air filtration units like devices into your home and you plugged them in and turned them on, and that was the type of unit. That's exactly the same concept, but we're going to do it for way more people. We just didn't have, at the time, we had a little bit of funding for the whole valley. So this is a lot of funding just for Shafter. Just an update, and based on mostly all of your input, we also had input from other communities, and we might do it slightly differently in each community based on the different community needs. But just as a reminder, we're proposing, of course, folks to live in the boundaries. We want to potentially, this wouldn't necessarily be for eligibility, but maybe to prioritize outreach, folks that are maybe low income or folks that have older or younger folks living with them or have maybe a respiratory disease would maybe just be prioritized, and we would do more targeted outreach. But that doesn't mean that folks within the boundary that maybe don't need those won't get any of the benefits. We also want to make sure that, to your points, there were also care facilities, including daycare facilities and private preschools you all wanted to make sure were eligible. And so that's what we wrote into the project plan. We also want to work with folks, and maybe it's some of you, on doing events that can help with outreach, maybe help prioritize folks that I just listed. So maybe the low income folks or the folks that have respiratory illnesses, partner with you on doing some outreach there. So basically the project plan is written so that we can continue to work together on how we implement it. It doesn't have to be set in stone. And that's actually how we're proposing it to our board on Thursday. I have one more slide about kind of how we're going to pass them up. I do see your hand, Michelle, but maybe the next slide will help a little bit too, in kind of the process. And so there's kind of two things. If you recall, if you were one of the folks that was able to sign up and get an air filtration device, again, it was that unit that we've sent to your house, and you plugged it in and you got an extra filter. That is the same concept we're going with here. And there's kind of two different things we want to do. We want to offer that same exact model to everyone in Shafter, meaning we ship directly to their house. They never have to leave their house. They fill out a very similar, very simple application. And obviously we feel like the only con there is we don't get to do as much outreach, but that's okay, right? We are giving it directly to residents. We also have another option where maybe we do both, and we want to hear from you all what you think would be the best way to get this out there. So the both meaning we do some in-person events. Maybe we host them similar to how we did with the lawnmower exchange for those that were apart, where we have a big in-person event. And if you signed up or you live in the boundary and you are eligible, in this case, you don't have to turn anything in, right? You just come to the event, you get your device or your unit, and then you're able to leave with that and with an extra filter to take home and plug into your home. We have definitely details to work out, and we'll keep you updated on how it would work for like care facilities. I know we talked about like elderly care facilities and daycares and private preschools. So all of those details will come, but we definitely have, because we did that pilot program, an idea of how it would work for all of the residents. So I see questions. I'm happy to take comments. We're here just to take notes and get back to you. So I'll start with Michelle and then go to Annabelle.
Yes, so the plan project plan components, the eligibility, will you talk on that again? You said that's really, what did you say about your eligibility?
We said it's proposed. Basically, we as a committee can decide if that's like an eligibility or just a priority. Basically, the direction we're going is anyone who's in the boundary is eligible. What we're going to do is prioritize outreach to the folks that tend to need it the most. And actually, it relates to Dr. Ramos's question earlier of who are those sensitive populations. Really, if you think about it, my answer earlier is almost directly from this slide. Sensitive populations are folks that tend to be enrolled in assistance programs or are younger than 18, older than 65, or maybe have a respiratory illness. We can decide as a group whether or not that's the only people that apply, but basically the way we're going in other communities is that this just helps us, we prioritize outreach to those folks. But the main criteria is just that you live in the boundary, because as you know, from all of the discussions we have, everyone in the boundary would be impacted. In particular, we're talking about wildfire impact. So really everyone, around would be impacted.
I like that better. When I read this first, I think that I see the need for what your eligibility, how you have it scheduled there, but I think everybody in the community basically should have an opportunity to get something, whether, but the outreach to those specific communities, or even if you said you could open it to the people have those priorities, and then give a second date where it's open to everybody.
Yeah.
And I've asked this a couple times, how much do the actual units cost? Because if we have $1 million and they're 200 a unit, we have 5,000 units. That almost gets to every house in the sphere, because I know that the city has like about 5,500 in the houses in the community. I don't know how many is the sphere influence, but just depending on how expensive they are, so I'd hate to just restrict it to certain people. Everybody would benefit from it, I think.
Yes, and that makes sense, Michelle. Actually, you're right, spot on. We are estimating about 5,000 units through this. So, and we can always reevaluate after. If we run out of the $1 million and we still have more folks that need it, we can have that discussion as a CSC. And so, yeah, that makes sense to me. I just wrote down, and it sounds like your comments are similar to what we've heard in others, is maybe we prioritize those folks first, or do, more targeted outreach, or do kind of a first round, second round. And so that's a note that we'll take. I did see a comment in the chat. I think Janine answered it, but I just want to just really quickly highlight residents. And I believe most of the folks on this call, if you signed up for our pilot program, did receive air filtration devices already. We have not launched the AB617 program. We have been kind of keeping you all up to date on what was necessary, and that was sort of that timeline that I just mentioned. So we're now at that critical point in the timeline. November is when we talked to you all, and we reached out to CARB. We didn't get comments back from CARB until a couple weeks ago, which is why we jumped on it quickly, and we're taking it to our board on Thursday. So that's sort of how that's how we're addressing kind of working with just Shafter. But I do see Annabelle's hand, and I would love to take more questions.
El comentario soy Maribel Valle, acá con Anabel. Yo estoy de acuerdo con lo que dice la señora. Si faltan 500 personas para darle a todas las personas, entonces tendríamos que pasar dinero de otro lado para que nadie se quede con un filtro, sin un filtro de aire. No podemos, necesitamos que todas, cada persona en Shafter, si vive dentro de Shafter y el $1 millón no ajusta, hay que pasar dinero de otro lado para que cada persona viviendo en Shafter agarre otro. Mi pregunta es, a mis compañeros se les llegó sus filtros de aire, excepto a mí. Me dijeron en diciembre, recibí una llamada que ya iban a llegar porque yo pregunté por ellos. Pero sin embargo le llegaron a mis compañeros, excepto, yo creo que a la única que no le llegó es a Maribel Valle. No entiendo qué fue la razón, o se perdió, no sé qué pasó.
Jessica, yo voy a responder en español. Maribel, buenas tardes. Soy Marisela. Estuvimos hablando con Daniela hoy porque parece que usted le mandó mensaje y estamos investigando eso de por qué es que no la recibió, porque en las notas de nosotros que tenemos, que podemos ver ahorita, es que sí ya la recibió, pero lo que vamos a hacer es que mañana, a más tardar, le vamos a hablar para darle más detalles para ver qué es lo que está pasando, pero vamos a investigar.
Y no creo que lo hayan dejado en casa porque mis hijos son buenos para ordenar paquetes y nunca se ha perdido un paquete, o sea que no tiene sentido que
Sí,
diga...
yo lo que estamos investigando para ver qué es lo que pasó.
Me parece perfecto, gracias.
Okay, gracias.
Thank you. And I've talked with Janine, and she's on this call too. I know that if we run into an issue and we need to, we can find a solution. Is that right, Janine?
Yes, absolutely. Our vendor Ace Hardware is very, very good about ensuring their delivery. So if something happened and it did not make it to you properly or was stolen or something in transit, they have been very good with working with us to get a replacement, another device sent out to you. So whatever happened, we'll make sure that we get it resolved and you guys get a device in your home.
Thank you, Janine.
And just you and another comment from Bianca. Does the district have a general fund that you can use if you need more monitors?
I definitely, so a couple things is right now we don't have a district-wide program. This is special for CAP funding, although we're open, and I think everyone in the Valley would be interested once we launch these to see what a district-wide program looks like. We'll probably have that conversation with the board on Thursday. I will say though, for this, we are open and committed if we run out of the funding and there's still a need for funding to look first at CAP funding because we have a lot of it for Shafter, more than we do the general fund. And start there as a spot. So we definitely want to commit is through the implementation of the SERP. If we need more funding for a measure like this, especially, we will find a way to get CAP funding for it. So that's community air protection. Sorry to use acronyms. I wrote down some great concepts. I'm sure there's more. I do have a couple of just quick updates because we talked about vegetative barriers. If folks don't mind continuing to put things in the chat, Janine is here and knows way more about this than anyone else. So I'm sure she'd be happy to keep answering questions. I do love what I'm hearing already, though. I think our team has good direction. Once we launch, we'll keep you all in the loop and keep working with you. But it sounds like we can do prioritized outreach, but we're not going to hold back on giving something to everyone we can in the community. So I appreciate that feedback. Awesome. I'm still sharing my screen, correct? Just making sure. Okay. I am going, just really quickly, we'll drop some of this information. It was sent out and it is in the chat in the presentation. For folks, we're plugging an electric device. And so we just want to remind folks that there are assistance programs for making sure that you can afford your energy bill and also making sure that your home is what we call weatherized, meaning it's protected and you're not just filtering outside air because there's like a gap or a leak in your window. We can bring folks and talk more about that at a future meeting. We would love to. We obviously have folks we work with CAPK on this, on our CSC and throughout this program, and we'll kind of put a pin in that, but I just wanted to remind you, we're thinking about the full picture when we're talking about this. All right, so just an update and then some things that I noted that I wrote down earlier. I just wanted to let you know and remind you, the Vegetative Barriers Program, we approved the project plan and CARB approved that project plan in 2021, but originally the CSC didn't have funding allocated. There was an ask to not have funding and see if we could just find partners. We all kept you in the loop and you all voted to shift funding so it would be funded. And I think just a lot of great insight from you all and a lot of good feedback from the CSC on shifting that funding and making sure we had support for that measure. As was noted in the comments earlier, vegetative barriers are where you plant trees and bushes to block pollution. And a perfect example is the discussion earlier about dust coming off of fields and how if there were trees that sort of blocked that dust, would that prevent some of the impacts to a nearby community? And the answer is certainly that is possible, of course, with the proper barrier placed and kind of depending on which direction the wind was blowing. And so with that, just last month, our board approved the funding reallocation. So we have official approval from our board for that funding to move. And we released what we call the request for proposal. So just as a reminder, the district doesn't do the tree planting. We look for other partners to do the tree planting. That can be the Current Tree Foundation, like a tree planting organization, although they're rather small and this is a rather large amount of money. It could be like Caltrans, or it could be the city or the county, just depending on folks' ability or maybe wanting to partner with different folks to do these types of projects. It will close in March. These types of projects are really big projects, so it takes folks a lot of time to put together what we call a proposal. We did offer a workshop last week. We did not get folks to attend the workshop, so maybe we can reach out to folks, or if you know someone who wants to apply, let us know and we can just directly reach out. The workshop just walks folks through how to fill out the application. And we will just keep you updated as we get applications. So what we would want to do is to work with you all once we get applications, let you know who applied, and work with you all to help us. So if maybe we get multiple applicants, we can ask you all to help us select those applicants. And to what you have all mentioned and we keep discussing, also select or direct or help direct where we want to prioritize planting the trees, which we've already heard from a lot of you, certainly around the La Colonia area. So that was my update. And certainly one of the questions earlier today was why we haven't moved fast. And that's just sort of this process that we have to go through because it's a non-district program, it's brand new. And because of the funding allocation, we had to get funding approved not only through the CSC, but through our board. So that's where we're at in the process. It is open right now, and we're doing a lot of outreach to folks to see who can apply. But I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions about vegetative barriers and next steps. Go ahead, Steve.
I just have a quick question about whether, so the RFP is simply, we have an allotment of money to plant trees, please propose, but there's not locations at this point, as you're just getting a qualified firm or company on board to be able to plant trees, correct? And then later, if there's multiple multiple proposers, we would be part of that process to vet them and then choose one. And then finally, this group would help pick the locations. Am I hearing that correct?
That is the process. We've kind of done it differently in other communities that sort of picked locations ahead of time, but then after the fact still had that feedback loop of kind of refining. So yes, to your point, we are the initial request for proposals is asking for an eligible entity. Now in their proposal, they might identify locations already as proposed locations. Or they can identify and specifically say, we will look to the CSC, but either way, we will all come back and there will be that full feedback of, it won't just be someone applying to plant a random barrier somewhere, 3 miles away from town. That is not going to be part of the process.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, so long as we have another shot at actually picking where the barriers ultimately will be.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes. So yeah, just to plain language, yes, the CSC will have another shot of supporting or not supporting a location for vegetative barriers. Go ahead, John. John, you're muted if you're.
I apologize.
No, it's okay.
These barriers can be the oleanders that we've talked about, not necessarily trees and strategic locations that we've generally know would probably make the biggest impact. This isn't just a tree barrier project.
Correct. From my understanding, and I'll not being the expert on the trees myself, I'll double check. But from my understanding, there are some requirements for like how. What's the canopy or like how thick the barrier needs to be. But I do know that oleanders are, and I know that Annabelle's mentioned this a couple times, oleanders are used as a barrier. So I'll get back to you that whether it has to be trees or it could be other sort of shrubbery or bushes. And then, yes, to your point, there are strategic locations. And if we haven't already put them through the RFP, we can just remind folks that we've talked, strategically about the La Colonia area. We've talked about, near a couple of different schools. We've talked about Lerdo and 43. So there are locations the CSC has already mentioned, and we do actually have a map that I think that we've discussed with the CSC before.
Okay.
So if we can add that as an action item, just so I can clarify the Oleander question.
Yeah, and if you'd, I'll reach out to you tomorrow. I wasn't aware we had a workshop and missed that.
No problem. Yeah. No, that's totally okay. And we're happy to walk anyone through. Really, the workshop was just to ask questions. So we're happy to call anyone individually and answer questions.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Gustavo.
Good evening. I'm just thinking what may be the best way to make the process maybe easier and quicker. Because I think, in one hand, I think the applicants, I think it makes sense, like, like the city of Chapter or those entities that you mentioned, Caltrans or maybe Wonderful, I think CRP, we don't see ourselves, committing for 10 years of, taking care of trees or, other small committees. But definitely, the residents and ourselves, we can help identify the sites. And I don't know, you mentioned that you are doing some outreach, and I think it will make sense, you have the technology and the skills to identify, what are those sites where the community needs the barriers. I think late last year we submitted some information about some of the sites. So obviously, it's not each and every site, but some of the sites that together with residents we identify. But I think any support that I think what we can offer, Annabelle and the residents and CRP, we can offer to help identify the sites where there is a need of the barriers. But I think maybe if the district can do like targeted outreach to those maybe growers or owners, of that land, because I think for residents it will be difficult to look who is the owner and how to outreach to them. I think it will be great if the district with the technology that you have and everything, I think it will be way easier for you to outreach to those folks, that maybe the owners of that land where the potential barrier may be planted.
I totally agree. And I just I mentioned a map earlier, and the reason I said it sort of questioningly, because it's been a while, but we did do some of that outreach together. The map I just dropped in the chat is that outreach we did. And it's reminding me now a little bit of all of that comments, all of the comments we got. And you can see, you click on each one of these trees. This map actually translates into Spanish as well for those. Here, I'll just quickly share my screen. I know we're running at the end of the meeting, but I'll just, for the sake of quick demonstration, so folks can, if once you click on this map, you can click on each one of these and see what folks were interested in doing and where a lot of the comments were. And I think to Gustavo's point, not only does the district have this feedback, and I think what we can do is we can continue to share this with Steve and John, who just kind of commented and talked about the process, but also others as we do outreach. So we're not reinventing the wheel, but at the same time, let you all know that we're still open to other concepts. So we're not closing the book, but to your point, Gustavo, there is some feedback we've already received from folks about the La Colonia area, and a lot of very specific comments too about kind of the area. So I super appreciate that. And maybe what we'll do is, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, is as a follow-up action item, we can follow up with the PowerPoint from that outreach presentation that we gave, the little informational session, and then also a link, Zong, to this map just to remind folks of that feedback, and then maybe just some next steps on kind of a reminder of what I just said today. But for the sake, Gustavo, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to follow up a comment. I think for us, trying to support and provide, input and everything. I don't know what may be the best best way of sharing that information that you already have, maybe with us, that we can, see what is already, which sites are already identified. And maybe from there, we can, if the residents identify other areas, so we can provide that information to you also, to be added to the map that you already have, but having something that we can see, that there are some sites already identified, so we don't keep sending you the same information time and again, but you already have it, maybe just to keep adding new places.
Yes, great idea. I think that's a fabulous idea. Thank you.
Thank you. It sounds like we have potential ideas for next agenda item. And Gustavo, it sounds like you might be a good co-host when that happens. So plug in the seed, Gustavo, so you can come be a co-host for that meeting when we talk about updating those maps. So I see we're at time at 7:03, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're at the point at the meeting where we have general updates. This is the time for agencies to provide some general updates. Kind of want to get consent from the CSC members, how you all are feeling. We can send you an email. I know sometimes that can be overwhelming, but we can send an email with all of the updates from the agencies, or we can stay on for 2 more minutes and kind of rapidly go through any updates that CARB may have tonight. I see DPR is here, Department of Pesticide Regulations is here. I'm not seeing Caltrans, but I'm seeing other agencies, so I'm not sure if folks would like to provide some updates now or get them all through email. CSC members, how are we feeling? I'm going to interpret the lack of enthusiasm to stay on as indication of wanting an email. So we're going to send you all an email with any updates. So agencies, please do expect us to reach out to you. If you have any updates, please do send those to the Air District so they can go out in a follow-up email. As you all know, we share the space with community members also. So if there's any public comments at this time or any folks that would like to share, now is the time. People are hungry, want to get off. I understand. Michelle's the only one that's eager to stay on all night. Me and Michelle are just gonna like crank it out tonight. Michelle,
you know it.
We will send your updates via email, Michelle, and we will also send, as requested earlier, the action items. We'll post them and send the link earlier than usual so that we don't have to keep you over time. It is 7:05. I do want to remind you that our next agenda setting meeting is going to be on Tuesday, February 21st at 4 o'clock. It's been moved because of the observed national holiday, which is the President's Day. So you'll see it's moved to Tuesday. Again, this is an opportunity for us to continue today's conversation and to continue to include a discussion about what agenda items should be included for our next meeting, which is Monday, March 13th. So we'll use that time to also include a co-host. I'm hearing from Gustavo that he might be interested in co-hosting here. So I hope to see you all at that next agenda setting meeting. Any general comments before we end tonight's meeting? I'm seeing someone in the chat. No, okay, so this is a little bit different. We ran out of time. So instead of reading out the action items and instead of reading out all of the updates, we'll send that via email and we'll continue this conversation, this ongoing dialogue that we had tonight. Thank you all for allowing us the privilege to be here tonight and to share with you tonight's updates. And we'll see you next Tuesday, hopefully. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all, and thanks.